prevent stuff like frozen. Now let's get to the skill gems. The skill gems are, as I said, Rain of Arrows. Rain of Arrows with increased area of effect in order to get a really large area. Added fire damage and weapon elemental damage. And weapon elemental damage also says more weapon elemental damage, and that's why I'm using 3 auras that give elemental damage: Hatred, Wrath, Anger and Wrath. These 3 give elemental damage of all 3 types, and because of that and the weapon elemental damage saying more weapon elemental damage, you get a lot of damage out of this support gem over here. And added fire damage is also a very good support gem because your physical damage is increased by all your modifiers, and then it is added as fire damage and increased by weapon elemental damage nodes. And basically it's multiplied twice by your effects, this 36% physical damage that is added as fire damage. And basically you deal quite a lot of damage with Rain of Arrows. And once I have a 5 link, I will link Concentrated Effect, which also states more damage, more area damage. And this basically means that I will multiply my damage again by a multiplicative multiplier. And that's why I will deal a lot of damage. I will never have to worry about damage with this build basically. The only thing I have to worry about is life and surviving, and because if you die you lose a lot of experience. And Frenzy I'm using with additional accuracy for the reasons I told you earlier. Added lightning damage, that's mainly because even though lightning damage deals a little bit less damage as something like chaos damage, support gem, it is lightning damage. If you crit with lightning damage, you shock the target. And as you can see over here, the main damage of my frenzy attack is lightning damage. It is about 924 max lightning damage that I can deal. And it is increased even further if I have frenzy charges, because the damage is increased with frenzy charges. And I deal a lot of lightning damage, and if I crit, I deal even more lightning damage, and I am very likely to shock my targets, and I'm even able to shock rares. And once you crit them, they die very fast because they are shocked. That's why I'm using the added lightning damage support, and also more weapon elemental damage, because this one also increases the added lightning damage. And once I have a 5 link, I don't really know which support game I will put in here. Maybe critical strike chance, more critical strike chance, yeah, probably. I'm going to look into that later if I have the 5 link available. And the 6th link is mana leech for bows, at which point I can remove my mana flasks. Alright, now let's get to this auras. As I already told you guys, it's Wrath, Anger and Hatred, supported with reduced mana. That's a no-brainer. I'm also using projectile weakness and increased area effect on projectile weakness. That's my main curse I'm using for enemies. That way my frenzy attack doesn't miss against rares, and also my Rain of Arrows deals a lot more damage because cursed enemies take 30% more damage from projectiles, which is again a multiplicative multiplier. And the other skill gems I'm using are all in order to increase my survivability in maps. I'm using not only projectile weakness as a curse, but I'm using also temporal chains, enfeeble and warlord's mark. Now, why do I have all these curses in my skill bar over here? First off, if there are enemies that are running really fast, as I told you guys, in maps I'm not using a Quicksilver flask because I need the burst healing from this instant life flask. And because of that, if I encounter really fast running enemies that can surround me rather quickly, it becomes really dangerous to kill these guys, and with temporal chains it becomes much easier. Enfeeble I'm using because there are some enemies that deal a lot of range damage, including elemental damage, and even though I have maxed resistances, as you can see over here, I have almost max resistance on all of them, and if I use my flask over here, which grants 27% additional elemental resistances, and my endurance charges, with Enduring Cry, which I will show you in a second, I have more than max resistances, and that way I can even do maps that have minus player elemental resistances and still be at the cap. But sometimes there are enemies that deal quite a lot of elemental damage or range damage, and for these guys I'm using Enfeeble, and then they aren't really dealing that much damage anymore and they become much easier. And Warlord's Mark I'm using because sometimes in groups, if you are playing in groups in maps, as you know, in maps you only have 6 portals and you can't really leave the portal and replenish your flask charges for your flasks that often. And instead of having to rely on going back to town, I'm just using Warlord's Mark in situations where some of the guys in my group are out of flask charges. And once they get the last hit on anything that has Warlord's Mark on it, they basically regain their charges, because Warlord's Mark increases the flask charges that you gain per kill by 100%. And if I use it on something like a rare and they last hit the rare, they basically refill all of their flasks. This is basically a support cast that I use from time to time if the flask charges of my party members are running dry. And in all other situations I'm using Projectile Weakness, Temporal Chance or Enfeeble, depending on the situation and whether I need more damage or more survivability. Then I'm using Enduring Cry. Enduring Cry is a really great skill because it gives you endurance charges, and endurance charges grant you elemental resistances, as I already told you earlier, and it also decreases the damage you take. It basically gives you damage reduction per endurance charge, and I have 5 endurance charges through the skill tree and also through the bandit quest, and this amounts to 25% damage reduction. And why is this so great? If you use something like Enfeeble on your enemies that decreases the damage by 30%, it decreases the max amount of damage you can take with a single hit. And why is this so important? If an enemy deals quite a lot of damage in a single hit, then it bypasses most of your armor, and the larger the hit, the less your armor protects you against it in this game. But if you reduce the damage by something like Enfeeble and also support your armor with something like endurance charges, you can still get a lot of damage reduction, even though the hit is rather large. And because of that, endurance charges are really great, and I really advise you to use this with melee Bowrauder build like this one. And it can also taunt enemies to attack you instead of your party members, which is some additional benefit. And the last thing I'm using with this build is Conversion Trap. Conversion Trap is one of the best skills I have ever seen in this game, but is quite underused. I have never seen anyone use this skill, and I wasn't using it myself until I started doing maps and encountered some of the hardest rares that I've ever seen. There are really large packs, and then there are even totems in this pack, and the pack becomes almost impossible to solo. While these packs are rather simple in group play, they are almost impossible in solo play, unless you have Conversion Trap. And I will show you what Conversion Trap can actually do in this game. Alright, there's a rare. You just take the rare here, and he belongs to you. And all his auras belong to you as well. Isn't that great? All these enemies don't have that aura anymore, and you actually get that aura. And killing all of these guys becomes much simpler. And this also applies to totems. If there's a totem that says cannot kill allies, you just convert the totem and you cannot die anymore instead of them. And then you kill everything while being safe, and it's basically one of the best skills in the game, but no one is really using it. Conversion Trap is really a great skill in my opinion. And that's why I'm using it. It makes group play much easier. You can convert totems, you can convert rares that have haste aura or energy shield aura. I have seen rares that give an energy shield aura that grants about 6000 energy shield, or rares that give haste auras with 40% attack speed and even more move speed, and it's quite insane that no one is using conversion trap, even though it is quite overpowered, in my opinion at least. And that's why I'm using conversion trap. It gives me a lot of flexibility in maps. I can circumvent a lot of dangerous situations with this conversion trap, and it's a really great skill. And that's basically it, guys. I will link the skill build in the description of the video, and I might make another video on the support camps in the future if I have 5 links or 6 links, and also on the items I'm using, which are quite bad right now except for this unique quiver over here. I might do a video on that, but for now, be satisfied with the skill build and the skills I'm using, and see you guys next time.